Iron Maiden was part one. Let's move on to the Samson years, all right? So for everybody who doesn't know Samson, Samson was I guess, in the forefront of the new wave of British heavy metal movement back in the day. And of course, Barry or Thunderstick, as we call it, he created this image. I'm not sure if you created it before you went in the band or during the band. So tell us about how you got into Samson and how you started creating that Thunderstick image.
Well, okay, how I got into Samson was yet again another audition. I kind of, a little bit fed up after the Iron Maiden thing fell apart. I was playing with other various people, and then suddenly, yet again, the religious melody maker, and I'm looking in the adverts again, and I saw this advert, drummer wanted for a hard rock band. The terminology heavy metal hadn't even been coined by that time. It was all just sort of rock bands and hard rock and stuff like that. There was Chris Aylmer, the bass player there. We went through the audition, all seemed pretty good, and off I went, awaiting the phone call for either yay or nay. The phone call came in and I was asked to attend another audition. I must have risen to the occasion because that was it, I got the gig. At the time, there were no videos, no DVDs or anything like that, no social media as we have now. All that you used to get regarding bands was a poster, and you would stick the poster on your wall, and 9 times out of 10 you would get the guitarist doing his best up the front and giving it all the posing, and the singer doing his best, and then you would see a row of cymbals in the top of somebody's head, and that would be the drummer. And there wouldn't be very many, I mean, we have the exceptions to the rule, like Keith Moon and Ginger Baker and John Bonham and people like that who stamped their own identity into the band that they were with, and everybody knew what they looked like. But most bands, the drummer was faceless. So I thought, you know what, I'll create a faceless drummer, and that's exactly what I did. The Thunderstick thing came about, and we used to get a lot of problems from women's lib groups because the women's lib movement was quite in its infancy at that time, and they regarded the Thunderstick image as being somewhat scary and an affrontment against women in general, because unfortunately in the UK at that time there had been a guy called the Cambridge Rapist who had been wearing a mask and breaking into women's homes and obviously, by the very nature of his name, raping them. And I had to try and fight this off because it was quite a big thing. We even had women activists ripping down posters because there were big posters with the Thunderstick image on them, and they would rip them down and they'd protest outside gigs and all this kind of thing. So yeah, it was quite strange. But anyway, the Thunderstick image was not meant to be anything like that. There was no belittlement of women or anything. It was purely a faceless persona. And of course these days we have Slipknot and people like that. I mean, I was doing it in 1979, guys, and you were in high school.
So yeah, I mean, and you know what, it worked. I mean, it grabbed the attention, and it differentiated yourselves, Samson, exactly, from the other bands.
Exactly.
So okay, we spoke about this before. Bruce Dickinson comes into the band. He injects, a new spirit. Can you tell me when he first came in, or unless you have something else to say prior?
Yeah, Bruce. Well, Bruce was really quite funny because Paul and I used to go out quite regularly. At the time, we had been playing as a three-piece, and to support the album that we had done, Survivors, which was the very first Samson album, we went out on tour, and the Survivors Autumn Tour. And we just finished touring and we were tired, but Paul and I used to go out socially quite a bit together. We went down to this pub in a place called Gravesend, and there was a pub band playing, and sure enough it was Bruce. And what a part of his stage show, or his persona on stage, was that he would start picking holes in the audience and having jokes at their expense, etc., etc. All done in a light-hearted way. There was nothing, you know, nothing too untoward about it. And this particular gig, the only place that he could use as a dressing room was the men's toilets. And to get to the men's toilets, you had to walk across the stage and go to the toilets out there. So he kept kind of, because he was doing this different costume changes, and he would keep nipping into the toilet and coming out as, you know, different persona, etc. And Paul and I just looked at each other and went, you know, this guy is really, really good. And we, when we had been playing as a three-piece, we had been approached by the then CBS company, and they were looking at signing a hard rock band, and they had their eyes on us. They'd seen a couple of gigs, and they had intimated to our management that we would stand a better chance of getting that big deal if we had a singer out front, and then that way Paul could concentrate on guitar rather than doing vocals and guitar. We were very much like Mahogany Rush, that kind of band at the time.
Yeah.
So anyway, we went into the toilet after Bruce, and he thought that because he'd been picking holes in me, he thought we'd gone in there to beat him up. And he was really sheepish and all this kind of thing. Anyway, so we got talking, and that was it. He's at uni, and he's studying his history degree. And we said, would you like to join the band? And he said, well, I can't at the moment. I want to finish my history degree. So what he did was, when we had those three-piece gigs, he'd come out and join us just for the encore. And, you know, so that we got an idea of what he could be like as a frontman. And that was it. As soon as he joined the band, for real, then we started, he had a lot of material, we had a lot of material, and, you know, we joined forces and drew on that material, and that is what became Head On.
Yeah.
So that's how he got in the band.
And I mean, what was your impression of Bruce? Okay, so Bruce is known as sort of like a Renaissance man today. The guy could do everything and anything. Was he like that back then? Oh, he can drive a train. Oh, he can fly a plane. I mean, was he like that? Did you see that in Bruce back then?
In the plane, it's Bruce Dickinson. No, well, he was. He had a zest for life, definitely. And he was hyper. He really was hyper all the time. And he thought that, you know, rather than having an agency to book our gigs, he could get on the phone, and because he'd been at uni, he knew all the club secretaries, the social secs, who are the people in universities that book the acts. And at that time in the UK, that was a really, really good circuit to be on. I mean, to play universities and colleges and all that kind of thing was a good circuit, because it was one step up from the club circuit, and you would just get, if you hit it right and you got the right amount of people in there, they were fantastic gigs. But anyway, Bruce decided that he would just go and book all the gigs himself. So he did. He just sat in the offices of our management, got on the phone and booked a tour for us.
So he was a shrewd businessman even back in the day. That's what you were saying to me.
Sure. Yeah.
Not only was it great, and I mean, he did, like with Iron Maiden, he pursued more of an operatic approach, whereas with Samson, he was more of a straight ahead singing approach.
Yeah, very juvenile in the early days, his voice. Because he had never ever recorded an album before, and I took a lot of the production credit. I sat there with our sound engineer during Head On, and we did all his vocal tracks. And he was finding his own voice because he loved Ian Gillan. And obviously the very fact that we were recording our album in Ian's studio called Kingsway, and I could tell you a story about that. First time that he ever met Ian Gillan, we were in the studio doing some overdubs or whatever, and Ian came in and came into the control room. Bruce then ran out to the toilet, and he was out there, and Ian went out, and he came back and he turned around and said to us, "You better go and get your singer, because the last time that I saw or heard him, he was in the toilet throwing up." And that and that was due to the nerves of meeting his all-time hero, Ian Gillan.
So you're in Samson, Bruce is in Samson. I know you guys are in the same circuit as Iron Maiden at the time, right? You're seeing Iron Maiden at the distance. Samson's playing. At what point did you start seeing, oh, wait, Bruce is talking to Steve Harris a lot. Did you get it? Did you sniff that maybe there was going to be, like, he was going to abandon ship and move to Iron Maiden? Did you get any inclinations, anything? Did you see anything?
No. I mean, it was down to me that Iron Maiden came out on the Heavy Metal Crusade. There was a band called Angel Witch, Iron Maiden and Samson. And our management were the ones responsible of putting this package together. They said, let's put a tour together, who can support? And I said, well, the band that I used to be in, they're doing the circuit again with new members. Let's have them on the tour. So I was the one that suggested. And it wasn't like that. It was, yet again, all three bands at the time, you know, business as usual, work as usual. It was all ongoing. We wanted to promote our own bands. No, there was nothing like that at all. We would talk to them, and of course, because you're in the same venue and you're talking all the time, but it was all about our own gig, our own getting out there and doing your hour and 10 or whatever it is.
What was
nothing like that.
What was the success like for Samson? I mean, did you say, wow, we're doing well, I think we could do better? I mean, what was the success like?
It was big. At one point, I was the focal point for the new wave of British heavy metal, because there was a magazine called Sounds. They put me on the front cover, well, not me, but Thunderstick on the front cover. And then inside, there was a huge, great big 2-page spread on one night of the Heavy Metal Crusade with all three bands. And they called it the new wave of British heavy metal. And that came about because in this country, punk had been prevalent, and you couldn't get arrested if you were any other band other than punk. There seemed to be record labels that were signing punk. There would be promoters that were promoting punk. There would be bookers who wanted to, you know, put punk bands on, and there was this undercurrent all the time of bands that had been brought up on the, you know, the old dinosaur bands, Sabbath, Deep Purple, Uriah Heep, and, you know, all those kind of bands. And so it was a new thing, and that was the very first time that was coined, the new wave of British heavy metal, and it was Thunderstick on the front. So I became the focal point for that. And yes, we had a lot of success, but unfortunately, because we didn't have the right management, we lost ground quite dramatically. And the bands that were, you know, suddenly we were overtaken by Iron Maiden. They were starting to become bigger, and because of the publicity they were able to generate and the kind of you know, promo that the record label would give them. With Samson, we never got that big deal. We were after that one big deal. EMI wanted us, and we actually cut a single for EMI, and we thought that it was with an option to record an album afterwards, but it wasn't. It was they were going to put the single out, see how it does, and then if it did all right, they were going to sign us. And so there was another company called GEM who pulled us away from EMI, and there were something like 2,000 of these singles pressed with the EMI sleeve and all that kind of thing. Never released. It was never released. That's a collector's item now.
Barry, do you have any demos or rehearsal tapes from the days of Samson that has never been released, or not even on the internet?
Yes, loads.
With Bruce Dickinson, I mean, that lineup I'm talking about?
Yeah, tons of them.
Are you ever planning on releasing this?
I don't know. I mean, yes, I'll have a look at it. I mean, that's why I have my big bag of tapes up here, my reel-to-reel tapes, because we used to record everything with Samson. We rehearsals, pre-production arrangements before we got in the studio, before the songs were dissected. They would be in a different format, and yeah, I've got loads of stuff. I've even got Bruce going to the toilet.
No, there you go. Make it a single.
Yeah, we stuck a mic up in the toilet because we thought it would be a good idea. And we just tape anybody that went in there.
All right, so Samson releases a few albums. You're on it. Bruce is there. There's a lot of success. Then suddenly, I'm not sure if you left first or Bruce left first. I don't remember. But
I did.
You left first. So what was your reason for leaving Samson? Was it poor management? What was it?
No, it was that Paul was always a blues player at heart. He was always, that's where his musicology came from, not metal bands or anything like that. He'd always been so much into Hendrix and other bands called, like there was a band called the Groundhogs, and all very bluesy type of players. And he was starting to get fed up that Thunderstick was, getting all the press all the time, because they loved it. They loved the image and they wanted to jump on that all the time. And the final nail in the coffin for me was that we did an interview, and I wasn't in attendance. I was elsewhere, and they said to the magazine, funny enough, it was Kerrang magazine, and that was in its infancy. And I did an interview with Paul and Chris, and Paul said, look, instead of writing about Thunderstick and etc., because I would play to the press all the time, obviously. If they wanted something bizarre to write about me, I would give it to them. And anyway, Paul said, well, we want to be treated seriously as a band, we want that kind of image to try and take a back seat. So please don't write about Thunderstick. And then when the actual interview came out, every single paragraph had a little picture of my mask by the side of it, and I wasn't even in the interview, and that was the straw that broke the camel's back. We had a big argument about it, and I said, it's not me, it's the press. And I said, well, they want to take a step back from that, and we want to wear drab clothes, street clothes on stage, etc., and I left. Because I wanted to take the theatrics a little bit further, because I was very much into theatrical bands like Alice Cooper and the Tubes and what have you. So
yeah,
that was it.
All right. I mean, and I know that shortly after Bruce Dickinson left the band to go to Iron Maiden, and I guess that was the big blow for Samson, because after that it was just they were recording, but it just wasn't the same, right?
No. Well, they took on Nicky Moore,
yes,
who was, I think, was perfect for them. I really do. I think he was the right choice. And Rod Smallwood and Steve Harris watched Bruce on stage with Samson, because just shortly after I'd left, they did Reading Festival, and the drummer that they used was Mel Gaynor, who plays for Simple Minds. And he only did that one gig with them. Well, one warm-up gig and then the Reading Festival. And that was where where Steve and Rod Smallwood watched the Samson performance and then approached Bruce afterwards. And it was terrible for Samson, because the management had managed to pull a nice deal with Polydor at the time, a big label. And literally, it was the day that they were all going into the office to sign the contracts to say, yeah, we got a nice new deal with Polydor. And that's when Bruce went and dropped the bombshell, and he walked into the... I wasn't there, obviously, but I know this for a fact, that he walked into the office and said, I'm leaving the band, I'm sorry. Yeah. And that was it.
So, I mean, the band, okay, you're out of the band. I know that you've done a lot of projects since, but, just to save on time here, tell me what you're up to today. I know you got a new album. Tell me about the new album, and I know is there a book that you have, or is it a book that you're in called Outside of Maiden?
Yeah, outside Iron Maiden, I'm one of the many members in there. Funny you should mention a book, because I'm actually going to, throughout the whole of the time that we've covered in this interview, I was keeping a day-to-day diary. And so I'm able to pull on that information, and I intend to do a book this year and sit down and actually start putting pen to paper, as it were. And then I have my new album, so I'm looking forward to that. Thunderstick, the band, will be brand new. I'm looking at putting a brand new lineup together. Of course, there was the original Thunderstick, of which we did one EP and an album, and fronted by a female vocalist. Because of what I spoke to you about the women's lib group, the reason that I put a female at the front was just purely because of that. I thought, I'm going to sort of buck the trend and put a female in front. So I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really enthused by it. I've got a lot of energy to put this new band together, and it's only as a result of the interest in past Iron Maiden members that, you know, this is 30 years after the event. The last time that there was a new Thunderstick album was over 30 years ago, so I'm really excited.
Are you planning on doing any Thunderstick shows? And what will the set list consist of? Samson, Thunderstick songs, plus Iron Maiden songs maybe? I don't know.
No, I think I'll leave Iron Maiden to Iron Maiden. But yeah, there'll be Samson songs and Thunderstick songs as well.
Well, you can always start the show off with, you know, Thunderburst, right? I mean,
yeah, of course.
That was my idea.
Yeah, that's your idea. Okay. if Iron Maiden suddenly decide to give me large amounts of publishing due to the fact that I was a co-writer of Thunderburst, I will give you some for your input. Yeah.
All right, that's pretty much it. I mean, is there, you know, actually on the last note, and we could insert this later on, prior to this, what about Clive Burr? Okay, you knew the guy. I mean, is there any cool stories you have about him or anything you want to say about him?
I really like Clive's drumming, and it was quite a pair of shoes to fill. Were quite big when I joined Samson, but we went in a different direction. But they'd been recording with Clive, done a couple of singles, and I love his drumming. I really thought that, in as much as my drumming is very quirky, I have a lot of people say that it's kind of off the wall drumming, especially with head on. Clive was exactly the same, and very different drummer from Nico. Very different, and yeah, we used to turn up at each other's gigs, and so if I went to an Iron Maiden gig, as you know, just to go and watch them, I would be on dressing room duty, which meant that I had to stop anybody, like a security really. I had to stop anybody from entering the dressing rooms while the band was getting changed and stuff like that. And then he used to come to Samson gigs and he would do the self-same thing as well. He'd stand outside and be on dressing room duty. And so we used to send each other Christmas cards with a very merry dressing room duty too. So sadly lost, I mean.
And Paul Samson as well. We shouldn't forget Paul Samson.
And Chris, yeah, Paul Samson and Chris Aylmer.
Yes.
You know, both Bruce and I being the only original members left of Samson. Yes. Which is sad.
And Paul Samson, a huge talent. I mean, we shouldn't forget Paul. Great talent.
It was great to play off of. I played off of Paul more than I played off of Chris. And for a drummer to do that, it's great. I mean, it's the same way that the relationship that Pete Townsend had with Keith Moon. Because of Chris Aylmer anchoring everything in Samson down to the floor, I was able to play off of Paul and Paul off of me all the time. So yeah, well, really, really, and a great mate as well.
If Bruce called you up tomorrow and said, "Hey, you want to do let's do a couple of Samson songs," would you do it? A little bit of I don't know, on stage, play a couple of tunes, just a reunion. Would you do it?
Yeah, of course I would do it. That would be really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, yeah. Bruce and I are still. I think we're still mates. You know, the last time I saw him, unfortunately, was at Clive's funeral, and we sat for quite a while talking. And I don't know who Bruce is as a person now. We're very different. The man's a multi-millionaire, and you know, he, as you said, a Renaissance man. He is. I mean, there isn't anything he doesn't get on and make a success of.
Well, there you have it. Barry, Graham Purkis, or other people like to call him, Thunderstick, a new album, a potential new book on the horizon. Thank you for being on the show. I love your mask. I wish the original mask was there, but anyways, we'll take that mask.
Well, you know, as you said, you know, you have the opinion that I carry it in my back pocket all the time, just for such occasions.
Just whip it out. All right, thanks for being a guest. Thank you very much.
I'm robbing banks, of course.
All right.
All right, Jimmy, nice talking to you.
Nice talking to you too.